Hello everyone, in this video I'll be sharing my thoughts on the mid-season finale of The Walking Dead, What It's Gotta Be. As always, there will be spoilers for the entire installment throughout this review, so I suggest you watch that first before watching this video. Anyway, without further ado, let's begin. If there's one word I would use to describe my feelings towards The Walking Dead TV show, I would probably choose the word frustrating. For every glorious high, there's always a major low. For every great piece of character development, there's another character doing something that makes absolutely no sense. And for every great start to a season, there's a massive drop of quality in the middle. Everyone surely knows by now that I haven't particularly enjoyed the last two seasons of the show, and it's been reflected in some of the videos that I've made. However, to me the start of season 8 felt a lot like The Walking Dead of old. The installments have been fast paced, tense and pretty damn fun to watch. For the first time in a long time I felt fairly optimistic about the show's future. Sadly, I feel as though the last few installments have completely sapped away any renewed enthusiasm that I may have had, as it appears the showrunners seem to have returned to the bad habits of old. Certainly the mid-season finale wasn't without its moments, but all in all it was yet another dragged out affair in what has been a very dragged out Negan story arc. As is the norm, I'm going to start by firstly discussing what I liked about this week's installment. And for me, Maggie was one of the brightest sparks to come out of a rather lackluster episode. Her confrontation with Simon made for tense viewing, and once again Stephen Ogg put in another solid performance as Negan's right-hand man. However, one thing that did baffle me was the fact that Simon just let Maggie return to the hilltop. I thought he was under strict instructions to capture her. I guess you could argue that maybe Negan now wants Maggie to return home so she makes sure her people continue producing for the Saviours. However, if this is the case, the show didn't really do a great job of illustrating this. After making her way back to the hilltop, Maggie was clearly distraught and pissed about seeing Simon shoot this guy, whoever he is. So she proceeded to go down the eye for an eye route by killing one of the Saviour prisoners held captive in a makeshift POW camp. Whether you think she was right in doing this or not is of course down to the individual, but it was an interesting moment which I'm sure many people will have differing opinions on. It also seemed like Maggie wasn't 100% sure herself about the decision, as she could be seen fighting away tears after she put an end to one of the Saviours. I detest the fact that the Saviours seem to pick off random people when trying to make a point rather than just killing the person who wronged them. So on one hand I am glad to see that Maggie gave them a taste of their own medicine. However, on the other hand it did make me briefly question whether Maggie is really any better than the people she is fighting against if she is just going to act in a similar manner to them. No matter what stance you take regarding this, in my opinion it definitely made for one of the most intriguing moments of the episode, and The Walking Dead is at its best when it's making the viewers question what is right or wrong. Of course, the hilltop wasn't the only community to feel Negan's wrath this week, as a group of saviours took it upon themselves to enter the kingdom. Whilst I did prefer Maggie's role over Ezekiel this entry, I still enjoyed the time spent with the king. With the saviours rounding up people on the street and Ezekiel nowhere to be seen, I genuinely at one point thought he had abandoned his people, especially as there was a scene of him shot in such a way as to make it look like he was attempting to flee. Thankfully, Ezekiel realised that his people still needed him and found the strength to act like a king should by helping his followers to escape. He created a diversion by causing an explosion which gave him the time to get his people away from danger. I'll admit it was a bit silly that the majority of the saviours abandoned their post to investigate said explosion. I mean, surely they could have just sent a few guys to check it out, but instead they sent pretty much everyone they had, making it a hell of a lot easier for the civilians to ultimately escape. Unfortunately, Ezekiel didn't manage to get out himself, and he ended up being surrounded by the saviours come the end of the episode. Morgan could be seen outside the walls listening to what was going down, and it would appear as if the scene was clearly set for Morgan to go full Terminator and rescue the king. However, as is typical of The Walking Dead, viewers are now forced to wait until the show returns to see what Morgan actually does, which leads me on to my next point. Now, one thing that really bugged me about this mid-season premiere is that it didn't really resolve much, if anything at all. This episode was hyped to the heavens by the showrunners and cast members, but unfortunately viewers are going to have to wait 3 to 4 months to see the consequences of many of the actions that took place. A prime example of this is the sequence in which Aaron and Enid come into contact with the Oceanside group. With Enid accidentally shooting their leader, one would expect that shit was about to hit the fan, except, well, it didn't. Enid or Aaron didn't reappear at all after this event took place, and I can only assume that The Walking Dead is saving the resolution of this event for a singular episode in the second half of the season that will be solely focused on the pair and their wacky adventures at Oceanside. It's disappointing that the plot seems so resistant to advancing forward. Seeing the fallout of this event would have made for interesting viewing, instead I've now got to wait until next year to find out what happens, at which point I won't care half as much about the outcome as I do now. Anyway, I'm supposed to be talking about things that I liked about this instalment, so before I put my critical cap on once again, I'm going to mention the two other characters that I enjoyed watching this week. You can probably guess who they are, as I've been singing their praises non-stop over the last 2 seasons, so of course, once again I'm going to be talking about Dwight and Eugene. Although I did just mention that I felt like not a lot happened this week in terms of advancing the plot, the same can't be said for Dwight's story arc. Finally, the saviours know who the traitor is, and I'm sure that D will be number 1 on Negan's hit list come the mid-season premiere. Despite him being a bit of a dick when he first appeared on the show, I do feel like Dwight is trying to do the right thing, or at least what he feels is the right thing. So in that respect, I'm glad Daryl and Tara both finally came to their senses and didn't go through with their plan to kill him. I mean, not only did Dwight sabotage the Saviour's attempt to barricade Alexandria, he also led them right into Daryl and Co's trap, and even killed a couple of them in the gunfight that followed. If Daryl had killed Dwight after this, for me there would have been absolutely no way back for his character. I'm really hoping that him and Tara can put their hate for Dwight aside and start accepting that this guy is helping their cause and can continue to do so. Moving on now to Eugene, and although admittedly the guy didn't get much screen time this week, he did make effective use of the limited time he got. Like Dwight, Eugene seems to be doing what he believes is right, although unlike Dwight, he doesn't see things as being so black and white. I particularly liked how he mentioned to Gabriel in their exchange that what is right is relative. Sure, to Maggie he may be revered as a hero for allowing the Doctor to travel to the hilltop, however the people of Sanctuary may see the idea of losing their Doctor a little differently. I stand by the claim that I made that Eugene remains one of the show's most complex characters. Whilst he did go out of his way to help Father Gabriel, that decision doesn't necessarily mean that now he is suddenly Team Rick, as evidenced by his decision to decline Gabe's invitation to leave with him. Despite the fact that he clearly still cares for the people of Alexandria, he isn't willing to completely abandon the people of the Sanctuary. I know that a lot of people still hate him, but for me I feel he is one of the best written characters remaining on the show. So now that I've mentioned most of the things that I enjoyed watching, it's time to look at some of the particular moments that left me feeling a bit cold. First up, I'm going to be taking a look at Rick. During the last 2 episodes, we've seen Rick focus on getting the garbage crew back on his side. Due to the casualties his side had suffered, Rick needed more soldiers, and he believed these guys and girls were capable of providing a much needed boost. Well, turns out he was completely wrong, as they pretty much didn't do anything worthwhile at all this episode. All the scavengers did was get shot at, which led to Rick and them separating whilst looking for cover, before Rick hopped into a car with Carol and drove off without them. Which begs the question, what was even the point of reintroducing them in the first place? But they appeared for all of about 5 seconds before Rick ditched them, making his journey during the last 2 installments seem like a major waste of time. But don't worry, I'm sure we will see Jadis and her crew in the future, sculpting things whilst half naked and still talking like idiots. So that's good, I suppose. Anyway, when Rick did finally make it back to Alexandria, Negan's attack was already fully in motion. With Alexandria up in flames, Rick panicked as he searched his home for Cole and Judith, at which point he came face to face with his old nemesis Negan. What followed was quite frankly an almost comical fight scene. There was no tension to be found at all during this encounter. We all know that Rick isn't going to die anytime soon, and there's no way Negan would ever suffer such an anticlimactic death inside Rick's house. So the whole fight, if you can call it that, had no real stakes involved at all. It was extremely underwhelming, and I just can't suspend my disbelief anymore that yet again here we are with Negan and Rick together with the chance to kill one another, but once again neither dies. This kind of thing wouldn't be that much of an issue if I was watching an anime or a superhero show that featured 2 overpowered protagonists battling one another. In this sort of situation I can accept that as both characters likely have some kind of power, the idea of them fighting over and over again isn't so stupid. However, Negan and Rick are just 2 normal guys, and the show needs to stop placing the pair of them together in such dumb situations. And before everyone jumps on my back and says that I didn't mind Rick and Negan talking to one another during the assault on Sanctuary during the season premiere, I still stand by that opinion. Yes, I know that scene was also pretty dumb, however it was entertaining to watch and more believable than the scuffle we had to endure this week. Let's not forget that the character of Negan was first mentioned during the second half of season 6. And yet here we are 2 seasons later, no closer at all to a resolution to the Negan saga. It's kind of become a running joke now that Rick and Negan just won't kill one another, no matter how many chances they get to, and quite frankly it's all getting a bit dull. I really think that one of the reasons the show is suffering is because of its insistence of having seasons made up of 16 episodes. Whilst The Walking Dead could pull off these lengthy seasons in the past, it just hasn't been able to since season 6 commenced. The need for 16 episodes has led to the show to become bloated with a ton of padding. I mean, we've now had a season of build up to the war with Negan, and it looks like the actual war itself is not going to resolve until the end of this season at the earliest. Negan is introduced to the comics in issue 100 and the war ends at issue 126. All in all, the entire story arc would only take the average person a couple of hours to read through, yet the show is trying to stretch this all out into around 40 hours of TV. It wouldn't be that much of an issue if the original content of the television show was of high quality, however the original characters and plot points are some of the show's worst aspects. I know I'm going slightly off topic now, but I can't feel that this needs addressing. The start of this season was brilliant, however after 5 very good episodes it seems as if the show and the writers simply ran out of steam and didn't know what else to do in order to get to the mid-season point. I highly doubt things will change as AMC seems to want to milk the franchise for all it's worth, but I can't help but feel that The Walking Dead would be a much better and tighter show altogether if it went down to 8 or 10 episodes a season. Anyway, with that mini rant aside, I obviously can't end this review without discussing the major talking point of this episode, that being the fact that Carl was bitten. I want to point out that although I've never been a huge fan of the TV show version of Carl, and much prefer the Carl that's found in the comics, during the last few years Chandler Riggs' take on the character has started to slowly grow on me, even if I do still think he's a pretty crappy actor. However, despite this, I still found this reveal to be incredibly cheap. I can see that there are hints splattered throughout the episode suggesting that Carl was already bitten before the final reveal. There was a scene of him shedding a tear whilst writing a letter to his dad, and he also mentioned to Negan that he knew he was going to die. However, it still felt like it came out of nowhere and was simply included in an attempt to try and shock viewers. As of now, I have no idea when Carl was bitten. It may be a case that maybe I need to go back and rewatch some of the episodes to pinpoint exactly when it happened, or perhaps there will be a flashback in the future explaining exactly how a walker managed to sink their teeth into him. Regardless of which situation is correct, I still find his creative decision to be very poorly implemented. As a comic book fan, it's a shame to be losing someone who is such a vital player after the war ends, and as a fan of the TV show, it's a shame to lose a character who has grown into their role and has improved an awful lot since their first appearance. People may say that it's a bold move by the show to take a detour from the comics by having Carl die, but for me it just felt like a waste of a character. The show has gone to such great lengths to show him grow from a child over the years, and it comes off feeling like a lot of the time has been wasted on his character with him being killed off. I know there have been reports that Chandler wants out of the show, and if that's what he wants, well that's completely up to him. However, I would have much rather the show have just written him out for a while in order to leave the door open for a potential return. As things stand, the episode ended on possibly the most pointless cliffhanger the show has ever ended on. Carl is bitten, the end. Tune in next time to see what happens. Except we know what happens, the same thing that happens to everyone else who gets bitten. Why must viewers wait 4 months to see his inevitable end? Instead of spending so much time on having houses in Alexandria being blown up, the show could have taken an extra 10 minutes to have Carl say goodbye to his dad and end on a truly somber note instead of just ending in the weirdest of places. Now I'm going to have to put up with seeing stupid fan theories about Carl is actually immune and will survive, or how Rick will contact some aliens and use space dust to keep his son alive. If you're going to kill Carl the Walking Dead, you should have done it properly. Before I sum things up, I also want to mention how much I detest the weird montages of face found at the start and end of the episode. I know it's trying to evoke some kind of feeling of epicness and make us reflect on the horrors of war, however I just found it to be incredibly cheesy. The awful rock soundtrack that accompanies these montages doesn't work either. The creative team need to accept that when it comes to trying to make the show seem arty, they just can't pull it off. And so I end this review in pretty much the same vein in which I ended things last season, with myself feeling angry, despondent and frustrated. The last 2 seasons were a big chore for me to sit through, and in a sense I kind of got used to the mediocrity of the show as it went on. However, this season things really kicked off with a bang and it seemed like The Walking Dead may be returning back to form. 3 questionable episodes later, I found myself asking why I got my hopes up in the first place. I've never watched a show that does to my emotions what The Walking Dead does. One minute I think it's the greatest thing on TV, the next I'm asking myself why I'm even still watching it. I truly thought that the show had crossed a major hurdle this season and that maybe, just maybe, things were looking up, with the last 2 seasons in the future being seen as just a blip in the grand scheme of things. Now though, I find myself wondering if I really want to go through it all again when the show returns. The Walking Dead is like an intelligent schoolchild who doesn't do enough work and insists on misbehaving. Sure, you know that the kid has potential and at times will produce some outstanding answers to questions thrown at them. However, just when you think you're getting somewhere, just when you finally think that you're making some progress with the child starts misbehaving like you've never seen before. So, what do? Well, you calm the child down and once again things slowly start to settle. You start to see flourishes of genius, great test scores and a much better attitude all around. When all seems fine, suddenly without warning or reason the child implodes, attacking their classmates, ripping up their homework and shitting on their desk. Once again you're back to square one. And yes, that is probably the weirdest analogy I've ever used, but it sums up how I feel about the show. I keep getting my hopes up only to be brought back down to earth with a huge thud. They say it's the hope that kills you and it's definitely killing me. Let's just hope that the break in between the season is enough to mend my broken heart. So there you have it, my thoughts on the mid-season finale of The Walking Dead. As always, please let me know your thoughts below. Perhaps you agree with me or perhaps you disagree and really like this episode. Regardless, just leave a comment. I always like seeing what you have to say. As always, thank you very much for watching. I will still be making Walking Dead videos even though there's a break now, so you don't need to worry about that. And until next time, thank you and goodbye.